Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining Phil and myself today. We're so happy to be here for the final part 3 of Cosmic Universe and exploring the cosmic universe. So, we have a real experiential treat for you guys today. We're going to be meditating a little bit on different platonic solids and shapes, and we want you to experience some of the fundamental platonic solid shapes of our universe and what makes up this 3D cosmic experience that we're going through. So, just to recap quickly, for those that have missed maybe part 1 or part 2, we talked about, I think it was in episode 1, sound and vibration and how things got started. And we talked a little bit about Big Bang. And we talked more about the esoteric aspects of our cosmic universe. Phil, do you want to maybe talk or fill people in on perhaps part 2?
Yeah, sure. So, the ground we've covered so far essentially is we're talking about the sort of like, I guess you might call them the perceivable elements or things that we've discovered through, through the eons of our ancestors observing patterns in the environment around them, including the stars and including, predictable aspects of reality. Because once we start discovering these patterns and how things play out, we can then, seek to mitigate any potential negative influence, and also learn how we can take advantage of these natural forces for our own gain. For example, we are going to talk a little bit about the 7 hermetic principles today. And so, one example from that would be monitoring celestial objects and seeing how social dynamics change. We've talked about, I think, did we talk about the moon? I know we did talk about some of the celestial bodies.
We may have touched on it. I'm not sure if we did. But
Okay.
this audience is definitely familiar with the moon, especially
Yes.
with Julie's amazing astrology.
Right. So, that's it. Perfect. So, we all know that at certain times of the month, there's this really shiny, bright object in the night sky. And leading up to it, we can notice that there are some socially sort of bizarre behaviors that take place, or bizarre, or just noticeably there's an increase of certain types of activity. And you can ask the police, ask the emergency departments of the hospital. There is an increase in a certain type of activity. And from a hermetic point of view, we generally view the moon as being related to the astral emotional body. And, it can, we would say that it would probably excite that body and fuel it more, so that potentially lesser refined aspects of the individual's astral body can get amplified and powered up because of this celestial body, like I said, amplifying this particular engine inside of us. And so becoming aware of how, say, the moon cycles work and how it's good for everything from planting crops and seeds to being involved in new ventures and creative enterprises. Relationship wise, maybe it's not a good idea to talk about a potentially delicate topic at certain times of the moon cycle. But the great thing about the moon, guys, is that it's so blatantly visible. The sun gets up. We don't have half suns and full suns. We do seasonally through the equinoxes and the solstices, in a sense, but the moon is this changing thing that we see pretty much every day, and we can visibly see this very pronounced celestial object in its variety of forms and as it shifts. And we can notice how those shifts affect our relationships, animals, plants, things in the natural environment. And so we're learning about a rhythm. We're observing rhythms that are associated with the moon cycle. And that could be what we call, in a sense, the law of correspondence too. But before we get into that, just as a recap, making sense of reality through observing the various phenomena, so that we can, learn how to work in harmony with the natural world, because those are that's good practices, working in harmony with lawfulness, and that helps with everything from abundance to growth strategy, and all of these sort of opportunities that maybe aren't made so aware to the mainstream.
Yeah. And it's interesting how when you look at things and you look at cycles and timing, even stock market and even like crypto and things tend to follow. You'll get where it's a full moon, there's usually a drop off. And then when it's new moon, you'll usually get some of the peaks happen. And sometimes there'll be other things, whether there's other astrology influences and that going on that can change things.
Yes.
But as we've said in other shows, you know, not just, what is it, millionaires don't use astrology, billionaires do. So there is cycles and patterns and rhythms and timings to everything. And even with what we're going through this year, there's a few people making videos talking about, you know, what we're going through with the planes and with other things is almost like an imprint of what happened in 1961. So, you know, it's really good to be able to step back, like in the show we're doing today, more back to the point of cosmic creation and look at some of these fundamental shapes and patterns and how we hold these things within us. But I love it that you talked about the moon. There was something I saw the other day, and we talked about this last week on the show where we had all of the planets, I think they were lined up, and we talked about the different levels of consciousness and ego that we walk through with these planets within ourselves, as well as an outward solar system. So definitely, you're right with the police and hospitals experiencing a lot more mischief and trouble on the full moons and a lot more accidents and things too. So let's get into the first little poster that I want to share today. And there's Phil's Substack. So remember, guys, that he has this amazing Substack that he's put together. So many blogs and information and videos. And yeah, there's so much that you guys can consume over days and weeks, if not months. So go and sign up for Phil's Substack so that you don't miss anything. And as we know, a lot of channels do get taken down and suppressed. So this is a good way to keep in contact and to keep learning more. What were you going to say, Phil?
If I might, I'm just going to say, for those of you who are curious about the hermetic journey or just looking for good business sort of practices for your spirituality, or however you want to frame it, I've just uploaded the latest, the Bard in episode 8. It's a live panel conversation with some well-known, and some well-attained sort of teachers. And so we just have some fun and answer common questions from the audience and some topics too. So that's up there now. No ads. And you can listen to it with your screen off, guys. So thank you, Solreta, for sharing my Substack, philrice.substack.com. Thank you.
You're welcome. And I know a few of my gorgeous clients, when I've had sessions with them, they're holding up the Franz Barton book. They're like, look, I got the book that Phil recommended. So it sparks so much joy for me to see that like you're really impacting the audience and that they're just loving the information that you're putting out too. I just want to put this up. So Corbin said, we have the same Venus retrograde cycle right now as in 1961. Ooh. So that's really interesting too. And I know Julie has mentioned just to be careful with this Venus retrograde cycle. I'm not sure if it's about to occur. I think it was around the 2nd of March, round to the 14th of April. Don't quote me on that. That's from memory when I was checking times. But yeah, she said it's not a time that you want to go changing your appearance or doing something wild and wacky that's like different. So just being careful with that. And even maybe from creative pursuits, if you're looking at designing logos or, making huge business upgrades and changes to website or anything like that, just maybe wait till after the Venus retrograde, because it could be a phase, just like cutting bangs or something. And I can see our gorgeous audience happy to be catching us live. And I just also want to share, must have been something. Oh, we're streaming. I just wanted to share with you guys, Mason Jupiter. Don't forget to hit that notification button, hit the thumbs up, and please share this out to anyone who's interested in these sort of topics. And we also have personal sessions available with myself and the gorgeous Sophie. The popular one at the moment would still be the Mystical Oracle, where we look into your questions, we do an aura drawing, we tap into what Spirit's saying for you at the moment, and we also play with the tarot cards and with oracle cards too. And sometimes, if it's requested, we will also look into guides and things. And we still have the How to See Auras course, which is on the Academy. And you will hear me mention a little bit about astrology. So also go and check out Julie's magical placements. But the first slide that we have to share with you guys is this cute little one that I saw shared on Facebook this week, the 7 hermetic principles. And I thought, this just feels like cosmic divine timing with this show that we're doing today. So, Phil, I'll let you address these and go over them with us.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Yeah. So guys, I think, whenever we choose to spend our time or invest our life credits, or, the one thing that we know we've generally got a limited supply of in some form or another, like knowing, what sort of value, or maybe you're following an intuition, there's a deep part of you that says, there's something here, and it may not be immediately apparent, but I know that it's worth investigating. Sometimes you have to push through the superficial level of, yeah, maybe it's interesting or not. It's like, no, this keeps getting brought to my attention, so I'm going to have a look at it. And so how are the 7 hermetic principles valuable and relevant to you potentially? Well, so like we've been talking about in the previous conversations, there is a usefulness to becoming aware of what's happening in the environment, and at the various layers. And, things that are, like I said, superficial have underlying mechanisms at play that we can come to understand, that we can either use to help mitigate the potential negative influences, reduce problematic relationships to certain influences. If you can master the moon won't be dragging you around all over the place through its cycles. There's a ways of becoming accustomed to the energetics so that they play less of a role in our driving our decision making and our walk. They can become aids. They become waves that we can surf rather than being thrown around by. And so when it comes to the principles, we have these 7. Now, there is a little bit of contention about the origin of these. This is from a book that was written in the early 20th century, I believe. And, without going into the sort of the history of it as such, one thing we do know is that a principle is, something that should be able to be tested, and then we can validate its actuality. Okay. But sometimes we need to take a little bit of a leap of faith when we're going to be exploring a new model that we're going to experiment with. So let's just run through these. So Sol, please just jump in. Otherwise, I'll just carry on with my monologue here. If you got any questions or anything. I can't hear you, mate.
Sorry, I just had to mute, had some noise going on in the background. So yeah, I love your take on things. So I'm here as a student as well as a refresher, but also I'll add different things that I've studied and learned too.
Cool. Thank you so much. All right. Well, let's get started then. So the principle of mentalism. Okay. This is like the spawn point of the whole conversation. It essentially infers that the universe is mind, and everything is made of mind substance. And so, you're looking around you and you're looking at the chair or you're looking at the table, and you're going, well, physics tells me that there's there's a lot of, there's so much empty space inside an atom, these kinds of things. And it's like, well, everything is inherently 99% empty space. And yet I can't put my finger through the chair unless I'm doing lucid dreaming trigger training. Okay.
Which we've just been filming a few shows on that with the lovely Greg Doyle.
Oh yes, you want to check out the latest Awakening Insider on the channel with Greg, because that goes into that in good detail. So if you want some more reference points for that, now, so this idea that everything spawns from the mind, it gives credence to the conversation that the universe is intelligent. There is an underlying intelligence operating and organizing things, in a sense, organizing things to come together, and also the entropic force of disorder. And, because things need to go through this decay cycle, this growth and decay cycle, so that new things can come into existence. Time has an effect. And so, but if we start off with that sort of foundational layer of the principle of mentalism, that everything is mind, then it sort of helps us to go, well, okay, well, if that's the case, how can I explore things from that point of view, so that I can sort of come to understand what all these metaphysical sort of jargons and terms are all about? And so the idea that and something that we can actually have a play with now, because Solreta brought this up just before we went on, and that was the idea of how we can explore shapes and geometry to get a new appreciation and understanding for them, and how they play a role at more of a metaphysical layer, because we obviously have some architects will design buildings based on certain types of geometries because they're either stronger or they're more durable or they're more aesthetically in alignment with the environment that they sit in, or that maybe this particular architect is aware of sacred geometry and feng shui, and they know how to build essentially a craft, a dwelling, so that it is conducive to certain types of positive energies emerging. And how can we come to know that? Because essentially we're reading books that have been written by other people, and even though they might all be in agreement, sometimes that's not enough. Sometimes you want to go, you know what, this is great, but I want to explore this for myself. And so Rita, funny you mentioned, this is interesting.
Just going to jump in quickly because there's a few things that you mentioned.
Please.
So this is a building where you're talking about architecture and you're talking about platonic solids and sacred geometry influencing. So Rudolf Steiner understood this to be true. And where you see his schools or you see his buildings, they're not four corners that are going to box or keep your consciousness limited. So not just in the music halls and the theaters that he made or designed, but you also see this here with the Gothetheum. So inside, you'll even find in some of the other buildings based on his principles, spirals, and you'll find things like Fibonacci spirals and other things that affect our consciousness different. Mm-hmm. So people talk about living in pyramids can sometimes send people a little bit mentally off kilter because it's almost too much energy. Everyone's different, of course. But you hear people living in like hexagonal type shaped houses and how that has a different kind of imprint on the consciousness. The other thing I wanted to share, I couldn't help but be struck and reminded with the image of when you were talking about mentalism and the first principle, that quote from the Matrix. So, spoon boy, do not try to bend the spoon. That is impossible. Only try to realize that the truth, and Neo says, what truth? Spoon boy, there is no spoon. Then you see that there is not the spoon that bends, it is only yourself. So it's really trying to, in a way, I guess, not influence or sort of try and manifest that change outside of you, but instead alchemically from within is basically becoming the spoon and bending with your mind from the inside influence. So yeah, I was just reminded of that when you were talking about mentalism. Sorry to jump in. Just wanted to add those pictures for the visual audience like myself too.
So that's actually perfect. You bring up that Neo quote from the Matrix there. Essentially, like, you'll hear this from, there's another YouTuber, quite a famous chap by the name of Grandmaster Wolf. He sounds like an Australian. I believe he spent a lot of time in Australia. He is able, I don't know if you've seen him, Sol, but he's performed a lot of pretty impressive feats, as a Taoist, as a psychic Taoist monk, as well as other things, 1-inch punch, bending things, chi pressure, telekinesis, these types of things.
I've only seen a little bit, but it's quite impressive, as is it Mark Rasmus that I think you also his work too. Yeah, quite an impressive guy.
Oh yeah, and the idea is that, okay, what are the teachers telling us? And so one thing that GM Wolf talks about is that, and others will say is that, well, you need to become familiar with the thing that you're trying to influence, okay, and to become intrinsically like familiar at the various layers of reality is how you can influence things. So we have this, we've talked about the three bodies. We've talked about the lower, middle, upper Dantian, or they might be called the vital, physical, the astral, emotional, and the mental, spirit body. And so this is essentially the realms of causation, because the manifestation chain goes this way. So we think about something, an emotion will arise, a power source in a sense that can help to fuel it. It's like when you go to the gym and you're there for a workout and you put on your music and now you're like, yeah, right, I'm in. Okay. And then your physical body and your vital body provides you with the ability to do so. And so, when it comes to creating change in something at, say, the mental level, we put our mind in it. And, the ability to concentrate and redirect all of your internal mental resources to explore the length, girth, and width of an object. So this would be a great time to maybe talk about the exploring one of the platonic solids as a sort of like as an exercise here.
Yeah.
So
Which one do you want to start with? Do you want to start with your one or one of the ones I've got here?
well, I tell you what, the best place I think to start off with for most people would be the simplest form we can generally think of, which is a sphere or a
Good idea.
circle, a three-dimensional circle. And this is helpful because, when we're talking about like, these two objects here, the sphere and the cube, for example, all right, one of them has got more complexity. And so there's more things that go on to sort of understand this. This here is like, we see this a lot in nature in the form of the bottom of a raindrop, or we might see it, some river stones have got this dome type of sort of look to them and that. Now, there are spheres that are apparently somewhat natural, kind of, but, a lot of what we're going to experience is, the inference of the object, just like we see the bees with their hexagons, although some would say that they're circles that are just squashed up against each other and they've naturally formed hexagons as well. That can be something to sort of
I've
explore
heard
as
that
well.
it's also a vibration. So the vibration of the bees buzzing in their wings apparently also makes the little hexagon shapes. So you know how we've talked about in previous shows that everything's based through frequency and sound and vibration. I guess that's a really good example of that. But I'm glad that you're choosing to use the sphere. Do you want to guide us through just a little process on how we can connect with that and our energy?
Sure thing. So, guys, before we can, one of the great practices is to essentially become familiar with something by just paying attention to it. Okay. Now, before we can maybe use telekinesis, for example, and lift it up off the table and turn it into a grapefruit or teleport it or any of those kinds of things, if that's the road you want to take, which for some will be quite easy and some will be quite involved and challenging and long. However, just doing data collection on an external object that we can conform our mind to, when we think about it, so I've got a sphere here. So I can't remember I don't think it's tiger's eye. I can't remember what it was, but I've got a sphere here. Here we go. It's like, what's even got, it looks like a couple of smiley faces in a thing here. I've also just got a normal glass big marble here, which is fine too. Okay. And so what I'm going to be doing here, there's several things going on.
It might be red tiger's eye.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Possibly.
Thank you.
That's a little bit more expensive than the normal standard tiger's eye.
Oh, that's nice. It was one of my Reiki sisters that gave that to me.
Oh.
Okay. Well, I'm just going to pick a plain one here. This is just a glass sphere. Okay. Because this crystal here may have some intrinsic energies related to the type of crystal that it is. Okay. So what we're doing is that we're really just finding a thing to put our mind inside of to explore how the shape affects our mental environment. So what we're kind of doing is it's kind of like bilocation in a way, but without getting too kind of pithy on it, I'm going to say, I want you to put your mind inside the thing. All right. So don't put it in this one, pick your own one. Okay. Because we all put our minds in at the same time. We might get some weird stuff going on. But essentially, you put your mind inside a sphere and you let it fill out and fill the sphere. And so your mind, your mental space becomes spherical. And then what you do is that you go, okay, well, I'm inside the sphere. I'm now going to explore it. I'm going to take a look down, left, right, up, down, forward, backward. I'm going to move around. I'm going to see what I noticed from what I see, what I feel. Maybe I hear something. What are you feeling as your projected mental body, what we call mental transference? Once we put it inside the object and we fill it up so that we're essentially joined with it, our mental body is forming the shape of it and just exploring it, right? And then as we spend time in there and longer, we will notice that new data points and sensations will arise. And that is because we're taking our mind away from our physical body, which has physiological processes which can capture our attention. If you've got a sore foot, I tell you what, that's going to be much louder than your feeling of chi potentially. Like if you're doing something, or you're doing something very, very subtle and small, but somebody's just smacked you on the foot with a hammer, that's probably going to be the thing that you notice the most. And so what we do is that we get really good at just putting our mind and closing off the other things and exploring inside a single object that is easy for our mind, or the shape of our mind, to conform to. That enables some other things. We can talk about those other things later, but just getting to know how that shape affects us. And then, Solreta, if you were going to do this exercise where you put your mind inside, what would you do, while you're doing this, or afterwards, to help maybe gain an understanding of, what's taking place here? What do you think someone could do?
Yeah, so I like what Jake's saying here. So this is just like John Vallo, and I think he's referring to John Vallo Melchizedek, talks about dropping your heart and coming from there instead of the mind. So for me, I guess being very physical, and I just ran to get a sphere. This is a nebula, this one. Let me just hold this
Yep.
up a little bit bigger. So this one is a nebula stone. So you can actually hold it, and it takes you on a cosmic journey where your consciousness, when you meet, like with your heart and your consciousness, it actually guides you through the universe. So we can use crystals as tools for these things. And here is a little sphere, and I just want to pop up. Connie put up a little fortune-telling sphere. So, when we think about scrying, or we think about looking into an object, it's more that we're sort of using it as some kind of cosmic mirror to reflect or tap us into different things. So many different tools for that. But if I was to connect and just take a few moments, I actually just want to breathe and connect my consciousness, and definitely expand my heart field to immerse myself, or kind of like mesh myself into the energy of this. So we have talked about, I think it might have been on some of the Awakening Insider episodes that we've done with Greg. We talked about the book God I Am. And with that one, it talks about placing your consciousness, within a tree, within a bird, within the stream, or within even the blades of grass. So for me, it's almost to I guess, feel into that object and feel my consciousness going into that. And you can be in everything all at once. So yeah, that's how I would connect with it. And we've got some other little shapes for you guys to feel in today. I will actually hold them up, and we'll get the audience to interact and just to remark or comment like what you feel connecting to each of these shapes.
Perfect. Yeah. As far as like heart work goes, some people may be aware of heart math, where there's a technique where you can move into the heart space, which is, this very, very interesting and lovely warm feeling, that you can pump. And so when you dip your spirit into that space, you can amplify that, because this is what we would call the pilot in some ways, the operator, the sort of the point of consciousness that's just observing and having an experience. And so, like you said, by transferring our consciousness, in hermetic terminology, we would say the mental body, if you will, by putting it into, these various sorts of, I guess, because there's going to be a level activity that's present in a crystal that's going to be somewhat different to that of a tree. It may be a lot more perceivable in a tree, because there's actually a lot more physical moving parts. There's water moving throughout. There's circulatory systems. And it's actively sort of alive, and it's alive in a different sense to say how a crystal is alive. But yeah, by all means, exploring, how we can, explore external things to develop sensitivity and awareness of them.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's a lot of fun, especially if you're doing it in a group setting like we are today. So maybe let's step into the first shape that we have on the platonic solids, and we'll get everyone to tap in. So just take a moment to center yourself, just take a few deep breaths, maybe hand on your heart, hand on your belly, connect with your breath, and just to still your mind. And the first one that we're going to hold up is a tetrahedron. So just linking your consciousness into this beautiful little tetrahedron, which is related to the element of fire. And Phil, if you want to close your eyes and just feel in as well and see if there's anything that speaks to your mind, to your consciousness. And just take a moment. And if you guys want to type into the comments below what it is that your conscious mind feels and experiences, or any downloads you receive around this beautiful tetrahedron. And I'll start it off by sharing. So the first thing that I saw was a cosmic fire that sparked from third eye area. And don't forget, in tarot, the fire element's related to the wands as well. So it's definitely one more connected to some of those spiritual realms. But for me, I was also reminded of the elements within our own inner astrology charts. So having a look at, how much fire do you have in a chart? How much earth do you have? I'm actually pretty balanced, weirdly enough, across like earth, air, fire, and water. I'm almost even, which I thought I would have been more air looking into that side of things. But yeah, I just see this beautiful cosmic fire that like awakens. What about you, Phil? Was there anything that you felt or experienced with this?
Yeah, sure. So, so what I'm doing is I'll tell you what I did, right? So there's the tetrahedron, okay, is generally when we experience it, it's upward facing, it's four-sided, it's made of four triangles, four equilateral triangles. And so I'm putting my mind inside this shape, forming this shape around me, constructing, letting my mind conform to this shape, or my awareness, my consciousness, whatever. And what I'm feeling is, it reminds me of what I've seen depictions of how the energy in the subtle energies in, say, pyramids work, because it's essentially a pyramid. It's just a four-sided instead of a five-sided one. And what I'm feeling is that I'm feeling an upward spiral emanating from my astral or my energy body, and it's spiraling and it's moving upwards. And which is interesting, because it does not surprise me that this happens. After seeing, was it prompted by things that I've seen? Maybe, but I think about the shape and I feel how it activates, excites, and moves some kind of subtle force within me.
That's really cool. And I've just been popping up some of the comments, which probably would have been a bit hard for you to read at the same time. But I saw Jake and Corbin both said about the spinning. So that's really interesting. And that's part of like why I wanted to do this experiment too, to see if there's any similarities. And it's interesting when we look at it from a Kundalini fire point of view too, we have this spiritual fire within us. So interesting that Jake had where it took him to another planet. I like that. That's really cool. And let's do another one. So I'll pick one more shape because we've got all of them here essentially. Maybe we do, what's this one? We've got, just looking for the shape reference on here. Let's do a dodecahedron, which is related to the ether element. I think that'd be a fun one to do. All right, so just doing, and we can see a few more comments coming in. Oh, awesome. Really cool. Thank you, guys. So let's do this one. And we're going to just feel into this dodecahedron shape, which is related to ether. Taking a moment just to recenter, connect your consciousness to this dodecahedron shape, maybe even feeling yourself with it around you. Okay, so the first thing that I saw and felt was almost like a grid with this energy around. And then I saw all this plasma consciousness and ethereal energy. And I felt like it was connecting me to that, that network or that system is probably maybe not the right word, but I feel we're so restricted with our English words. But I felt that it connected me to the consciousness that connects with all things. And I can see Deanna saying plasma windows. Thank you for that. And interesting, you guys are talking about chevron amethyst. I just got given one. Sounds like we've got a cool little chevron amethyst club happening. So yeah, Tim saw a pentagonal castle in the clouds with angels, fairies flying around it. Interesting, especially because they're also connected with very much the ethereal realms and the ether. And we've got Dave feeling blank. And it's just a matter of practice. It really is just, clearing the mind, connecting in with the body. And we're doing it quite quickly here. So it can take a little bit longer sometimes for the conscious mind to quieten down and for you to tap into the subconscious. So don't give up. We've got Connie seeing green blue plasma. Awesome. And Tanya, I was the center of a web, bright and soft light. That's kind of similar to what I was seeing and experiencing. We've got Rainbow Sun with the Da Vinci Man painting. I think it's the David. You might remember that one.
It's the Vitruvian Man.
Yeah, the one with the arms and things out. I think
it's the Vitruvian Man. Yeah.
Thank you. And hopefully I'm getting everyone's comment. Oh, Lorianne felt a door and portal opening. I did feel too that we could use it as kind of like a mind link to be able to connect, whether it was into other universes and to almost like pull information connecting in this way. We've got Corbin, the energy got really small, then big, then dissipated into the cosmos. Awesome. And what did you want to add with this?
Yeah, so, when we're talking about the concept of ether being the fifth element, which is essentially the spawn or the origin point for the other four elements, once you bring those four elements into harmony within yourself, then you're able to access your own personal portal into the ether, which is what, Tom Campbell from the Monroe Institute refers to as the still point or the 0 point. And we call it the void, we call it the akasha, we call it the great abyss. And so, the properties and attributes that we find in materials relating to the topic of ether, without just talking about the dodecahedron shape, which I'm coming back to, is essentially it's spaceless and timeless. And so, my initial experience, of moving into that object and seeing that it was related to ether, was a vacancy, a void. And that's synonymous, I guess, with my understanding of it. So yeah, I mean, it's the person who didn't feel anything. In this case, that's actually correct for me, from a hermetic point of view. I mean, everyone's
actually.
Yeah. So, but
I think it was he didn't feel it on the first one too. So, but yeah, you're right from like the hermetic perspective on the second one. And I just want to grab why we're talking about this. An example, because we've got the spheres that you were talking about in nature. I just want to grab an octahedron because it is interesting how things will morph and shift. So when we look at crystals and crystalline structure and frequencies and minerals and things that make up our physical reality, got a little octahedron, a fluorite one here, which is quite a good size one. You don't often see them this big. But this underground will morph between being a cube. It's a little bit dusty. He needs some love. So they'll morph underground from shifting from cube state to back to octahedron to cube state. They're forever sort of shifting and changing. So that's really interesting when we think about the consciousness and we think about, a cube representing Earth, and then they're shifting to, more to this octahedron shape, so which is related to air. So they're going from Earth element to air element. It's just interesting. I've never sort of thought about like the elemental aspect and how they're sort of shifting from, one zone to another.
Yeah, that's cool. I think too that, like we've been talking about in this series of conversations, is that, there's these real world, physical, tangible examples that we can explore. Like, why do these things grow in the shapes that they do? Some crystals, you can go to the shop and you can see, okay, well, somebody's definitely cut that because, you can tell, right? But then there's the ones that are like, naturally formed, they're long and straight, that's another great exercise, when you're playing around with exploring how you can put your mind or your consciousness into things, You know, the different shapes when they're in a compact sort of small form, you can make they're going to be subtle shifts, and so you'll notice the subtle when your mind is occupying the shape of a cube, whether then it shifts to a tetrahedron and to an to a dodec and these other shapes, and as the complexity, because there's obviously many shapes. I mean, just look at the types of dice you can get in a Dungeons and Dragons dice kit, for example. Like there's all these different, 6 of them, I think. But if you want to explore some mental flexibility, put your mind in something long, put it in something tall, put it in something this way, put it in a sphere, put it in a thing. Notice how the shape, the geometry affects your internal environment, and that will give you a hint, because even at a mental level, as we say in hermetics, even at a mental level, there is a process of form that's you kick into place by putting that shape around you. And so as that slips down into the astral, into the energy body, into the feeling, the heart body, and, not really technically the heart body, but, you will find that the more tangible substance will start to be stimulated and swirl, if you will, or start to activate and take on a behavior as a result. And we see that, like what you were saying with the bees buzzing, what is the frequency they're buzzing at? If you played that same frequency across a metal plate covered in sand and then pump the frequency through it for a cymatic image, what would appear? And so there's lots of ways of exploring this without using, hard technology. You can use your own internal technology, but yeah, trying this exercise and playing around with what we've talked about today, guys, is a really fun way of having a personal experience. And the one thing I'd say is that if you want to take it even further is note down, what you observe, much like dream journaling. Don't attach the meaning to it and evaluate it or interpret it until after you've captured the raw objective data. That would only be my only suggestion there, just to maximize on it. But yeah, mate, write it down and then, go through the process. I mean, I've got, check this out. So I have a range of these spheres. I was going to use another word, but I'll call them spheres. I've got big spheres and I've got small spheres. And I've got some Chinese, what are they called? The balls that you have in your hand.
The I Ching balls that you,
not
or
sure.
something like that. But they're not to touch. They have the bells inside.
That's right. And so, there's another way of having a relationship to these things, and putting your mind inside them. What's the difference between putting your mind inside something made out of glass, not a naturally formed crystal, but this is made of a crystal, and then inside something like, like a metal constructed sphere. And notice, because there's the shape that your mind takes and how that affects your internal environment. And then there's the stuff that the thing is made of and how that level of reality affects your internal environment. Because the shape will do one thing, the material could have another effect, as well on top of that. So
that just brings my mind back to, certain structures and how, in the old Tartarian buildings, we had a lot of somatic patterns. We had a lot of sacred geometry. We had a lot of antennas that were drawing and pulling in ether into the buildings. Whereas the buildings that we live in now are quite basic, almost like dead on a soul level. So I wouldn't mind getting a yurt and living in a yurt. I think that would be an interesting experiment. Maybe having a studio yurt. I think that's definitely a goal for the future. But what you were saying before about tapping our consciousness into it, I was sharing with Phil backstage that when I studied sacred geometry and it came time to doing the exam for it, and I just dropped my consciousness into each of the shapes and wrote exactly what I felt. And it was one of my highest pass rate tests, getting 98%. So, we have this unconscious relationship, but when you turn your attention and your focus and your energy to it, it speaks to your soul. And this is how we work with things, like psychometry, whether it's working with the stone and crystal and asking what it's for. And this is the way, I guess, when we hear people talk about, in the bush that people, ate the red berries and someone died. And then so people went, don't touch that, it's poisonous. It's actually more like in the ages of Mu and Lemuria that we had a conscious or co-conscious relationship with plants. So plants would actually grow around you for the environment, for what you would need. So just like that time I was down at the river with a friend, got stung by a bull ant, and she's a herbalist. She pulls up a fern, she washed it off in the river, and she's like, just chew on this and then put the white on your foot. Instantly the bull ant bite went away. So she said that, where the ants are, there will always be the plants or the medicine or the antidote. So I think we do still hold this knowledge deep within us, and that's part of why I wanted to have this conversation today, and why Spirit led us to the platonic solids. Is just, we want to stretch your consciousness and stretch your thoughts, in that just as there's the Internet of Things, we have this plasma or subconscious connection to the energy and the consciousness in all of these things that we're talking about. I'm probably not wording it in the right way, but you guys get my drift, I'm sure.
Well, hey, look, we can connect with the consciousness of seemingly what might be considered unconscious or non-sentient life. But we can transfer our consciousness into these objects, these items, these plants. Plants and trees are great. Some things might be weird, like things that in hermetics, at some point we'll put our mind inside, animals and insects and things like this. But we'd start off with things that are much more familiar to us, because some life experiences the world in such a different way that it might be too abrupt and jarring for us. So we work with things that are seemingly sort of innocuous, or not going to be too hardcore, because you can put your mind inside objects, you can put it inside situations, events, into people, and these types of things. And sometimes, like somebody put a question up about what about, is there a danger of putting your mind inside technical things? Well, I mean, some things are going to be imbued with an intention. Maybe, it's like, would you eat a burger? I mean, we probably don't, most people on this thing, but would you eat a burger from someone at Macca's who's in a bad mood if you knew they were in a bad mood, right?
And just for the non-Aussies and Kiwis, Macca's is our version of McDonald's.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I got to remember that, right. So when it comes to choosing objects to explore with your consciousness, hey, look, the natural things that are naturally formed, simple things. If you want to experience the contrast, like, when we, in part of our tree qigong chaining, we'll go and find a really big tree. We want to find another really big life force emanating entity that's maybe old and ancient. And we can send our mind in there and start waiting for the impressions to arise and go, oh, I can feel something there. And then the more time we spend in there, then we might be like, I'm picking up on astral or historical, past life, historical types of, the lifetime of the entity that I'm occupying here. I'm picking up on that data, because each one of our bodies has sensory input organs that overlay each other. And the more time we spend observing subtle data, the more those perceptual capacities open up and allow for more quantity of data, but also finer resolutions that weren't previously apparent to us. We'll start noticing new things. Before, all I saw was this. Now I see more. I see different ingredients. I see shapes. I see more. There's more detail revealing itself.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. And I think, we can sort of just look at something basically or for a first glimpse, but then it's like you're breaking it down to whether it's the mineral level or, looking more at what the consciousness has to show you or teach you, which with crystals, you get an extra layer of consciousness that comes with it. So we don't have too much time left. We might run a little bit over, if that's okay with you, Phil.
Perfect. That's all good.
Okay, fantastic. So with the second principle of correspondence, so as within, so without. So we look into this a lot on my channel as well, where we talk about law of assumption, and we talk about, creating different identities or creating like a new version of self. And instead of placing our consciousness, on the things that we don't want, and I just put a little quote up on Facebook and I think Instagram and things this morning. Let me see if I can find it in a second. When you're talking, I'll see if I can bring it up. But essentially, we want to be really conscious of everything that we're inputting and everything that we're holding emotionally, because this will form a law of correspondence or a vibrational harmony where we attract these things from without. So I just wanted to bring this back to like a practical manifestation thing. Did you want to share like your take on number 2?
Yeah, sure. So, in hermetics and in other magical schools, we have a system of what we would call correspondences that we build up about how things relate to each other. And some of the more popular understandings of the law of correspondence is, rightly represented within that phrase, as above, so below, as within, so without. And so we can see when we look at a spiral galaxy, or a solar system is probably a good one, how that looks similar to what our understanding of an atom is. The branches of a tree are related, the network of that, how that's related to the root system, or how neural pathways and what we call them, it's not synapses, the I guess you'd call them the all of the internal branching of systems within the human body are mirrored by things that we see in the sky and also within the external environment. So there's these common themes of patterned, we could call them geometry, but patterns of like when things go seeking out for growth, that, it might appear, like to be these pathways or these highways of information, and so, when it comes to the law of correspondence, if I said to you, what color would you associate with heat or something that emanates heat like fire? What color would you associate?
I guess the first thing would be red.
Right.
My brain goes to red, orange, yellow, but a lot
Yep.
of people would probably say red. Yeah.
Perfect. So we've just made a relationship association with something that is felt to be hot, okay? Something that is, that is moving and expansive, and something that we see as red. So it's got these layers to it, and it's like, okay, we've also seen what happens when you light up, acetylene torches and certain types of natural gas, and we might get a blue color. But generally speaking, if we were to light a fire in nature, we would see this red, orange, yellow type of thing. So, that is
That's a
one.
great way to look at it.
Yeah. And so what happens is that when we're doing our hermetic training, we're essentially we're doing a 3-point concentration where we're holding the color red, we're feeling the sensation of heat. We're rather than experiencing the data, now we're creating an output of the data, which is why you see those monks sitting at the top of a mountain in the cold with their robes off, and they've melted a diameter, like a 2-meter diameter around them. They can feel heat, but now they can use their astral body to generate heat and these kinds of things. And so we have a function at each level to help feed into that process. And that's when we fuse what we call the 3 Dantian. We use the law of correspondence, because another part of that is the law of analogy, which falls under the law of correspondence. But anyway, essentially it's like, it's very useful because there's a perfume that goes with that color, that goes with that food, that goes with that dress, that goes with that thing. And when you line up, you get this at a very fashionable level, you get aesthetics. But those aesthetics are made of several components, because it's the right smell with the right visual, with the right thing. When you go to a church cathedral and they're swinging the frankincense and there's these huge stained glass windows and the acoustics, you've got sight, sound, smell, taste, hearing, all of those senses are catered for to create an experience for you. And they're lined up in a certain way. They're intelligently put together to evoke a certain type of response.
That's such a good visual representation too. And when we look into magic, or you're wanting to tap into love magic, there'll be number correspondences. You'll be looking at the planet Venus, roses, violets, pink, rose quartz, and then other certain plants and things are all connected to bringing that energy, which you're magnetically drawing that vibration to you. I just wanted to share this before we move on to the next one. So this was a little post that I put up this morning, just a download that I got in the shower. So if you don't choose your thoughts will choose you. So don't let your brain be the train that runs away without you. Stay conscious and create a daily ritual. with our potions, get into the driver's seat and actively curate your thoughts. So, overriding and deleting negative self talk and mind spirals, choosing to think inspiring, positive, gratitude filled thoughts, and watch your life change direction. So, the reason I've popped that up is because if you're thinking about law of correspondence, and you're feeding your brain garbage, or you're consuming things that are negative, or you're thinking negative thoughts, you actually have to consciously override. And I'm just going to pop this up. I literally have the word override typed out that Spirit told me to type out ages ago, maybe like a year or so ago, that you have to like use that giant red stopper button to stop the thoughts in the track. And then you can replace it and put 5 new ones in at least. So this is a way that we can use that, or realize when we're starting to correspond with things or become entangled with things that are not for our best and highest good. So this is where we're getting into the pilot seat or the train driver's seat to steer it onto new tracks. So I'll always like to sort of relate something back to whether it's manifestation or other things that that we can work with. What about number 3, Phil? The principle of vibration: nothing rests, everything moves, and everything vibrates. And I'll just get you to speed through the last couple of ones quickly, if you don't mind, so that we can get through without being too much over.
Sure thing. So I'll bring this down to maybe something that's a little more relatable, and we'll call it the law of resonance. So everything's wobbling. That's a given. Okay. And everything's wobbling and wiggling and shaking and moving, even if it appears like it's still. Only the ether is truly the most still point, essentially, at that bottom layer, the bottom substrate. That's the joining point of all things, the common denominator. So when it comes to vibration, think of frequency. This is that whole, law of attraction type thing where you attract, what you're putting out there. And that's why, it's really important to consider the thoughts you choose to entertain, because that creates that initiates a creation pathway. If your mental body is vibrating this because you're thinking of this, if your astral body is vibrating this tuning fork because it's feeling this, and then your physical body, whatever you're putting in or experience yourself, is wobbling because of that, those 3 things create an overall resonance, which attracts the thing, right? And so the more clarity you have and the better trained these 3 bodies are, the more you're likely to get what you want. So
that's a really good one. And I like how you put it to resonance as well.
yeah.
And we can link that back to manifestation and
Oh yeah.
who you're choosing to be around. And there's that quote, Phil and I've talked about this on other shows too, where you are most like the top 5 people that you hang out with. So,
Oh yeah.
We're in such a gorgeous, beautiful, blessed community here. And we see that law of resonance and vibration working. What about number 4, the principle of polarity?
Okay, this is very useful for developing contrast. So when we're trying to discover, the difference, we found something we like, and we are, or we haven't figured what something is, and we're trying to figure it out. We can do this thing where we discuss what it is and what it isn't, and that creates clear separation, right? So you might write down, when you're writing your Tinder profile, you might be like, okay, non-negotiables. Nah, smoke it, nah, drink it, nah, whatever it is, okay? You're going to be like extremes, like, okay, yes, no, okay? And a polarity can have gradations in between it, where you might be like, well, okay, I'm probably a little flexible on that. If he's a vapor, well, I could probably deal with that. Or maybe he, maybe he drinks a tea that gives him bad breath, but if he sorts it out, I can deal with it. But polarity is essentially useful for discovering contrast. Just like you'll have a small tree and a big tree, and if you're training with a small tree, that might be hard at first because it doesn't put off much energy, but the big tree, that's your contrast. Like, wow, I'm getting blasted by this tree energy because it's so physically large. It puts off this higher volume, so it's easy for me to connect. Okay, and so for training, the law of polarity is very useful for training, but even just for managing your life and going, like a clear yes and no, like in your life, setting boundaries and things like that, and determining what those are. But yeah, that's a good snapshot I found useful for training anyway.
So. And I think dating is a fantastic way to bring it back to physical relatability and reality. And we do have the 2 polarities of masculine and feminine. which is interesting because if you look at the law of opposites, it comes back to that third point, or comes to, the masculine and feminine merging to create a child. So number 5, the principle of rhythm.
So we see cycles of movement, and as in like the principle of vibration, everything's moving. Well, things move in patterns. And so the difference between rhythm and vibration is essentially like you take the movement, and then it starts to organize into these kinds of repeating patterns that may not be initially visible in the short term, because some cycles go over incredible periods of time that go far outside of like human lifespan. But we know roughly how long a goldfish's memory is, like 10 seconds or 30 seconds, something like this, and then elephants have got, the elephant never forgets,
Yeah.
but when it comes to rhythms, things like celestial bodies like the moon, paying attention to predictable patterns and starting to get to know them, your unconscious will seek to equalize with them so that you're not getting thrown about. That's why in hermetics we do training to essentially free ourselves from environmental influences, whether they're the elements on the earth plane as a starter or the the planetary influences. But rhythm is valuable on so many levels, and I could talk about musical rhythms being relatable, but I think just for now, like knowing how things move and when they come back around again, when there's a full moon coming, when there's a new moon coming. Those are rhythms that you can start to discover the value of understanding what this particular law is about.
And even looking at the rhythms in your day-to-day life. So sometimes we'll get stuck or pulled into other people's things and create or work from a space of unconscious patterns. So I was just doing a seminar just before we started today, and just taking notes crazily to get everything down that was in the seminar. It was with Tom Bilyeu, or Bayou, however you say his name. But anyway, he was talking about, setting up for greatness. And he's saying, if you're not working, then you're working out. So essentially, it's, really like making the most use out of your time. And I think that's what we have to watch is, something can become like like a habit, or, something that's like we're doing every now and then can become a habit, or it can become an addiction. So we want to look at setting up like positive rhythms. So it might be, going to the gym, or it might be going to yoga, and you're then around a beautiful group of people, and it's where you're getting this flow back as well. Because with that, the principle of rhythm, whatever like you're putting or investing your time and energy into, some things are dead and some things are null, but other things you will get this beautiful kind of dance that comes back. And I love the analogy you and Tim also talked about with music. He had a little quote that he popped up. Where was that? It was just back a little. I had it on screen before, but talking about it's the silence between, here it is. I thought this was a great one. Thanks, Tim. The silence between the notes makes the music. And, it's really important to actually feel or just tune into your body, see what kind of rhythm you're in. And if your nervous system's just feeling like a little bit overwrought, or you got too much going on, it's your responsibility to scale it back and to self-regulate. So this is a way that we can look at it from that essence. Number 6, the principle of cause and effect. Change is not but a name.
Just quickly on the rhythm thing, establishing healthy rhythms in your life is a very good practice to do, because you're essentially setting up good code, good programs, good things that lead to good things. So yeah, absolutely, great way of you making it you immediately useful. Nice one. So cause and effect. So you do a thing, you do A, and then B happens. There is a mechanistic nature to reality that is extremely complicated and vast, but we can see, how when we flick one domino down, it hits the next one, and then that hits the next one, and then so on and so forth. And then down the chain somewhere, it's somehow triggered an event where somebody shows up at your house with a wheelbarrow full of cash. That'd be great, wouldn't it?
Let's tap into that rhythm.
Yeah, right. And then there's the butterfly effect, which seems completely unrelated, right? But somehow that seemingly minor event triggered a series of other events. And it might be an idea. It's like Inception, the movie with what's his name,
Leonardo.
Leonardo. Like they incept it at a mental level that's attached to the actually even better, I'll just say they put an idea in that has got some emotional traction, because that's usually what carries it through. Sometimes to have a piece of information is not enough. You've got to be engaged, right? If you want to sell a product, just being aware of it's not enough. There has to be some kind of engagement hook to get people over the line to make the purchase, so to speak. And so, finding out, if there's an outcome effect that you want, what are the causes? What is the causation chain that leads to that? And that's what we work with in developing psychic skills as well. There's ways of awakening these things. There's a process of development that you can follow.
Yeah. And I think one of the biggest things with that is investment. So I know even myself, with being a reader for, gosh, I started when I was 15, 44 now, so a long time ago. But the biggest thing that we hold ourselves back with things that we really, really want to do is a lack of confidence. So if we're talking about cause and effect, it would be doing the classes, it would be doing the practices, it would be, applying the skills and knowledge, not just accumulating it from a mental point of view. Because I think a lot of us live these amazing lives in our minds, but it's to put it into action. And, this is where we see cause and effect on a physical 3D level really sort of come into to take effect. How about number 7, the principle of gender? Everything contains a masculine and feminine principle.
Okay, so this is where we see the yin yang sign. So we see the two fish swimming, and then we see the big black with the white dot and the big white with the black dot. So we see how there's fire in the water and there's water in the fire. Okay, so we see how lava flows. We see how water flows. They're the same but different, but we can see the water element apparent in fire. We can see the flames licking and sloshing around. We can also see the spiky, pointy, violent nature of frozen water and water thrashing about in a sense, And so we can see, the active elements within the mother, who's the solo mum, who's playing both mum and dad, and vice versa. We're seeing the dad play the role of the mum, traditional roles being spread, so many single families and solo parents. And so they're having to assume both. That's a very gender-based understanding of the law of gender. Gender goes far above sort of, biological or sexual preference or designation, if we will. But without getting caught up in that conversation, because we really want to talk about that. That's not like that. It's not like a hot one right now, right? But essentially, what it's saying is that you've got the plus and the minus. This is metaphysical. This is prior to human stuff, right? We see the plus and the minus, and how they work with, against, they complement, they're complementary opposites, but how we can see there's a bit of what might seem to be clearly separate and unique, distinct things show signs of incorporating the opposite within themselves, and looking for that and going, okay, this is how we can, if we go backwards through these principles, we can see how we can arrive back at mentalism, because we're putting reality back together again at one stage, various ways at a time. And we can see that, if mentalism's at the top, then gender is sort of at the bottom in a way, you could say, because it's been everything gets split up into twos. Correspondence is 2 on, vibration is a series of things on a spectrum, polarity is about making a thing and then it's finding an opposite. There's we can see how these things represent activity and behaviors of things in the visible world. And I know we're running short of time here, but guys, even just a cursory knowledge of these principles, you don't have to go too deep in them, but just being curious about it, even going into the AI and saying, hey, how are these things relevant in my life? How can I view them? Just getting a quick snapshot, because once your unconscious starts to feed on the actuality of this data by collecting evidence to support it, you're going to start, because the whole purpose of these things is to give you an edge in life. Knowledge gives you an edge, and that knowledge becomes understanding that you can make decisions on, and you can feel much more certain and confident about them. And like you said about the previous one we talked, like building confidence by I can't remember what the previous one was. It was cause and effect. If you want to build confidence in something, there's a causation chain that leads to that. So these are very logical things that you can incorporate that are also very spiritual, if you will, as well, because they exist at fundamental layers of reality beyond normal awareness, but you can see them once you know about them.
Yeah. No, that's good. I love it how today we've brought things also into the practical. I just want to share with you guys this little thing that I made that we used in my last Soul Alchemy Potions New Moon event that a few of you attended, which was so beautiful to share that time with you. So I've popped down the bottom, the limiting emotions, and this is a way we can sort of apply some of the things that we've talked about. So say, for example, you're living in lack. To pull you out of that lack or the repetitive like mind loop of, oh, I don't have enough for this, or I can't pay this bill, or, so-and-so's like, not treating me right, whatever it is that like our lack story is about, we need to start getting out of that by raising the frequency up. So going from something that may be sitting around like, 20, 30, 40 hertz up to gratitude, which is, up into the hundreds. So thinking of like the 5 things that you're grateful for. So just practice these principles and these things each day in your life. And it does lead to a different outcome. You're changing the neural network programming and you're running different stories through your brain. So it takes a while to defrag and to get used to running a different story because, however long you've been alive on the planet, is however long you've been programming this hard drive. So it takes a little bit to do all of that pruning, but it's definitely worth it. And being around other people that have a supportive and similar mindset like we have on this community is just such an amazing way to keep being reminded. Watching shows like this, we're going to keep you accountable. We're going to make sure that, that you're reminding yourself to do these things. And, I have popped these on social media as well. You'll be able to download it on Facebook. If you go back into my post, please download it, print it out, have it, whether you put it on a mirror or, just like a little post-it on your desk. There's a few other charts as well that you'll be able to have that'll give you little prompts for shifting things. But I do want to remind you guys to please come on over to Maison Jupiter, have a look at the courses we have there, the sessions that we have available and consultations, and use the discount code Jupiter to save 10%. And thank you so much for watching this amazing 3-part series that we've had with Phil Rice. We've been so blessed to have you for 3 episodes. I feel so, so lucky. As to the audience, I can see everyone's like, part 4, please. So everyone's really loved having you on. Do you want to talk about what you've got coming up next, Phil, and anything that you want to share with us?
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Yes. So as always, a great pleasure to be here on my Son Jupiter with you, Sol. And thank you to the lovely ladies and, Julie for putting this all together. I know what's involved, guys. To my own
thank you, Julie.
Yeah, you do an amazing job, mate. And there's a lot. I know that there's always going to be lots of work involved in any of these types of enterprises. So I'm very grateful. So what's coming up on Phil Rice? So the Substack is essentially the hub, but I also have a pretty busy YouTube channel where I host regular live streams. At the moment, I'm kind of calling them the Hangout or the Dojo. And this is essentially for those who are curious about learning more about the hermetic development pathway, which is almost like what we might call a Western yoga that involves forms of Qigong and Tai Chi and also Kabbalah, but it's not intellectually as heavy as you might think. This is not so much mental gymnastics as it is, applying things in a felt way. And so we take this kind of clairsentient approach to building up sensitivity and building our intuition. And it's a lot of fun and it's very straightforward and it's very mechanical. But that's, over on my Substack, we talk a lot about that. I've got another Reiki article coming out soon. As some of you may be aware, I'm a Reiki teacher and practicer. Yes, thank you. So this is my set more. At the moment, I've got sessions for Reiki, consultation, tarot, and just general meditation. Basically, guys, I've put the categories up there, but, just buzz me if you like. And, if you've heard me talk about something that you want more information on, if you want to book a session for a service insight, or if you're a Reiki practitioner wanting to, gain if you've read any of my Reiki articles, you might find, oh, okay, you're speaking about things that I'm not currently aware of. You're most welcome to connect with me and we can talk about it. But yeah, so there's a bit of stuff coming up. I've got, I think, a couple more interviews and I'll be doing more live streams. And I'm also got a couple of courses I'm chipping away at. And I'll be crafting some videos as well, as opposed to doing live. So please watch the space. Go to the set more. I will have a hopefully weekly setup class up there soon. So thank you so much, Solreta, for this opportunity to share my wares and services, and thank you so much for having me on. And yeah, I'm totally cool with coming on for part 4. Absolutely.
Oh, awesome. Well, thank you so much from myself and the community, and also from the girls at Maison Jupiter as well. We've just adored having you on here. And it's just been a lot of fun and a breath of fresh air as well. And thank you, everyone, for your work that you put into the comments and your love that you're also pouring in on a Soul Tribe level. And Phil, I will see you for Awakening Insider. That is our next one together, which will be over on my channel. And I think, are you putting them up on your channel too?
Yeah, so with the it depends, like I'm floating new things to my audience to see how they engage, but they're a pretty hard nosed bunch of hermeticists over there. So yeah, I'm advertising.
A different subject, but you'll
Yeah,
also
yeah.
Greg
Yeah,
Doyle
I'm just exploring that at the moment. But yeah, guys, you can check out my Facebook too, where I advertise the events as well. And I do a weekly sort of newsletter on my Substack. So go to my Substack and sign up, and I do an update letter which advertises things. As I get more involved in things, I'm just learning how to schedule them and categorize them for the growing audience and figuring out how to do it all. But I appreciate everyone's patience while I set all this up. I'm very grateful. Thank you. And yeah, but check out the Substack because I have all my updates on there.
Well, thank you. And I will see you tomorrow, Soul Brother. And good night, everyone. Have wonderful dreams. Bye.
See you guys. Bye.